title, The Call of the Deep. When I first started playing Subnautica, I expected adventure. I wanted to experience the awe of alien oceans, to build a sprawling underwater base, to uncover the mysteries hidden beneath the waves. What I didn't expect was the deep-rooted fear that the game would awaken in me, a fear I'd been suppressing for years. Thalassophobia had always been a minor inconvenience, a nagging unease whenever I swam too far out at the beach, or saw photos of endless ocean depths. But in Subnautica, that fear felt alive, like the game wasn't just playing on it but feeding it. I couldn't shake the feeling that the game was designed with the intention to force the player to subconsciously overcome that fear. It tugged at me, that gnawing unease you feel when someone or something is watching you, waiting just beyond your vision. It started on my first descent into the kelp forest. The water darkened with the normal sickly green hue, but darker than I had ever remembered it being. The music shifted to an eerie tone, cracking and breaking as it played as if there were some kind of interference. I froze as I caught sight of a stalker, its sleek, predatory form gliding through the dense kelp. It wasn't just the creature. It was the sheer vastness around me, the knowledge that anything could be lurking just beyond my vision. I felt like I had explored the area enough for the time, and returned to my base to de-stress and plan the next steps to finishing my sea moth. I learned to deal with the stalkers, sand sharks, and even the bone sharks. I learned to move fast through the water, keeping them on my sides, never going too far in front of them, and my confidence was growing. But as I ventured further, into the blood-red waters of the blood kelp zone and the barren depths of the dunes, the unease grew into something far worse. The first sign that something wasn't right came during a routine salvage mission in the sparse reef. I had been collecting fragments for the Cyclops when I noticed a faint noise in the background. It wasn't part of the soundtrack, it was too faint, too subtle. It sounded like a whisper, just on the edge of perception. I thought it was a bug, maybe a distorted audio file. It would explain the distortions I heard earlier in the kelp forest. But as I moved closer to the edge of the biome, the whispers grew louder, more distinct. They were garbled, like someone trying to speak underwater, but one word stood out: deeper. The sensors sprang to life, spawning a new waypoint. The AI's automated voice filled my ears. Anomaly detected, causing me to almost crap myself in the nearly silent waters. I laughed it off at first. It was just the game trying to be creepy, right? But when I turned back toward my sea moth, it wasn't there. I was sure I'd parked it nearby, near the blood kelp just behind me. I had left it near the seabed as I had been keeping low in the kelp to avoid any unwanted attention, but the beacon was gone, and the surrounding area didn't look familiar anymore. It was as if the terrain had shifted while I wasn't looking, or maybe I had drifted farther than I thought. I tried to rationalize. It didn't make sense, though. The beacon would still be here. I swam aimlessly for what felt like hours, my oxygen meter dropping dangerously low. Just as I was about to surface for air, I saw a faint light in the distance. It wasn't the bright blue of my base beacon or the harsh glow of my flashlight. This light was soft, almost inviting, like the glow of a bioluminescent creature, drifting gently in the dark waters. I felt so disoriented and lost from where I had come from. The light seemed warm, welcoming. Against my better judgment, I followed it. The only thing accompanying me was the gentle whir of the Sea Glide's engine. The light led me to the edge of the deep Grand Reef, a biome I hadn't yet explored. My oxygen meter was perilously low, but the light kept pulling me deeper. Everything was eerily silent, like I had muted the volume, but I could still hear the engine accelerating. The unease I was feeling in these open waters was palpable as I wiped sweat away from my forehead and continued pushing onward. When I finally reached the source, I wished I hadn't. It was a figure, humanoid but wrong. Its body was translucent, its features barely distinguishable, except for its glowing eyes. It didn't swim. Its motions were far more erratic, jerking back and forth through the water, dislocating its limbs and back as it mimicked the movements of a leviathan. I wanted to turn and flee, but I couldn't move. My oxygen meter alarm began shrieking as it hit zero, yet I didn't drown. Instead, the figure tilted its head, studying me, and spoke in that same garbled voice. Deeper. The screen went black and I was back in my base. My inventory was intact, and there was no indication I had ever left. I assumed it was some kind of scripted event I hadn't heard about, maybe a teaser for the story. But when I tried to look it up online, there was nothing. No one had reported anything similar. From that point on, the game changed. The oceans felt darker, emptier, yet I constantly felt watched. My base lights flickered at random intervals and would shake as if a leviathan was attacking. Strange shadows appeared in the waters, always just out of sight or darting amongst the kelp and foliage, or even diving into the jellyshroom caves. No matter how fast I followed, though there was never anyone or anything there, Occasionally I would hear the whispers again, always repeating the same word, deeper. Despite my growing unease, I couldn't stop playing. I felt compelled to dive further into the abyss, as if the game itself was drawing me in. It was the only conclusion I could come to, as that was the only biome I could continue to go deeper in. When I finally built the Cyclops, I set out for the Void, a biome that most players avoided because of its infinite drop-off and the leviathans that prowled its depths. But I wasn't afraid of the leviathans anymore. I was afraid of something else, something I couldn't put into words. As I ventured into the Void, the water turned inky black, and my sonar began to malfunction. The usual roaring of leviathans was absent, replaced by complete silence. That's when I heard them, the same whispers from before, but louder now, more distinct. Deeper, deeper, come to us. The Cyclops shut down entirely, leaving me in pitch darkness. The fear inside was telling me to turn back, but I couldn't wimp out now. I had come so far, and something inside me needed to know what this was. I switched to my prawn suit and descended into the abyss. My depth meter ticked higher than I thought possible. Past 1,500 meters, past 2,000 meters. The pressure gauge should have shattered the suit, but it didn't. Instead, the HUD glitched, displaying a series of symbols replacing the numbers as they flicked through a series of characters I couldn't decipher. Finally, I hit the bottom. The seafloor was barren, stretching outwards in all directions except for a massive circular structure that pulsed with a faint, sickly green light. As I approached, my prawn suit froze, and the whispers stopped. The same translucent light I had seen before glittered around in the abyss, followed by another and another, each one approaching me erratically from all sides. Dozens, maybe hundreds, all darting silently towards me. They surrounded me, their empty eyes reflecting the only blackness back at me. This time when they spoke, it wasn't a whisper but a deafening roar that filled my headphones and seemed to vibrate through my entire body. You were never alone. The screen went black, and my computer crashed. A loud crash echoed from my kitchen as if a glass had shattered. I ran downstairs to check, and one of the windows had shattered as water rushed in. I quickly scouted the windows, the door frames, and every exit on the first floor, frantically panting quick, airless breaths. I grabbed the receiver to my phone and called the police. Static filled the other line, racking and hissing at me. As I ran upstairs to survey the area from the second floor, I could see the endless oceans from the game, sprawling endlessly before me. It was very different, though. A dark storm was brewing outside, and hectic, thrashing waves beat against the walls of my house. I swear that I could see shadows just beyond my vision, dark figures swimming around in the distance. I glanced at the monitor of the computer. One of those things swam there on the screen in the distance, distorting its limbs and swimming closer. As it came, the monitor began to emit sounds of interference. I glanced to the window as I heard the sounds of splintering wood and the creaking foundations as the house began to tilt. My heart felt like it was going to burst from my chest in that moment. I looked back at the screen. In the static buzz, the creature was gone, but the static grew louder. With no time to think, ran back into my hallway to the stairs. The water had already reached halfway to the second story. I opened the window and climbed outside onto the roof. The house was slowly sinking. The whisper of that thing called out to me again, deeper. I began to hyperventilate as the house sank beneath the waves, leaving me stranded at sea. The waves smashing against me and carrying further out. I kicked for hours, desperately trying to keep my head above water. Every now and then, unseen things would pass by me in the water, touching my feet and legs as they flailed beneath me. My sight began to grow dim, and my exhausted limbs could no longer struggle. I felt myself sinking below the waters, and I had no will to fight back. Just as my head slipped below the surface, I awoke. The computer was on, glowing brightly in the dark. The game was gone, without a trace. No matter where I looked, there was no data, no save files, no screenshots or shortcuts. It had just vanished. The whispers didn't stop, though. I hear them now, even when I'm far from the computer, especially when I'm near water. Sometimes, at night, I can hear the waves at my window again. And every time I wake up gasping for air, but I think next time I might listen. Maybe it's the only way to get them to stop. Maybe I just have to go deeper.